Broadcasting across California, you're watching The Issue Is.
Welcome to The Issue Is. I'm Elex Michelson. With us this week, you see her right there, perhaps the best known and most influential tech journalist of all time. And that's not hyperbole. Kara Swisher saw the digital revolution coming when few others did and has hosted most of the biggest conferences in tech ever. From her perch in her signature red chairs, she has interviewed all of the biggest leaders in tech, including Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and so many others. She's also a prolific podcaster. Among her current shows, On with Kara Swisher, her interview show is one of the top podcasts in the country, as is the Pivot podcast, which she co-hosts with Scott Galloway. Her new book is called Burn Book, a tech love story. It's a New York Times bestseller. Kara Swisher, welcome to The Issue Is for the first time.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I've heard such good things about you.
Oh, well, thank you. I know you're not one for brown-nosing, as you can tell in this book.
No, but I actually have.
But I got to say, Burn Book is my favorite book of the year. It is so honest and smart and funny, and I couldn't recommend it more. Our pal Harvey Levin of TMZ came on our show and said, you have to read this book, and I did.
Oh, wow.
And I went to Harvey and I said, I got to talk to her because it's so good. So congratulations.
He did. He's great. He's an early digital person, by the way. He's, you know, he had such a varied and interesting career, and he was one of the few that jumped off onto digital in a really significant way a long time ago. And so that's why I know him, oddly enough. There's no reason for me to know the head of TMZ, but he was digitally fast forward.
And they get 30 million unique visitors a month because they were ahead of everybody. And this book really does tell the story of how you saw the digital revolution coming. And so many people didn't believe you. Can you talk a little bit about where that was at the beginning?
Yeah, except for Harvey. A lot of people, you know, it depended on who did, actually. Interestingly enough, in Hollywood, Bob Iger and Barry Diller did, for sure, because I met with them quite early on. But a lot of people were quite resistant, including the places I worked, like the Washington Post. You know, they thought this newspaper thing would go on forever in print. And I think they didn't see the implications of where it was going, which is sort of the theme of the book, which is everything that can be digitized will be digitized, right? And I think that seems like a kind of a silly thing to say, but it's really quite profound when you actually think about it, how much can be digitized. Music, entertainment, everything else.
Yeah, literally everything in our lives. And it's a reminder of how life was even in the mid-90s, which is now so different from now. Do you think the same thing is happening when it comes to AI, that people aren't sort of ready for what's coming?
I think they understand it a lot better, and they're certainly worried in the correct ways, which they never were. Everything with the early internet was up and to the right, and isn't this dandy, and aren't we all going to be, you know, cyber citizens? And I think we saw some of the implications of not understanding the guardrails we needed to put in place. With AI, I think people are think it's going to be a profound shift, but are also worried about some of the things, which I think is a good thing. It's not a bad thing to bring things into question, but definitely this is another Cambrian explosion, just like the internet was in terms of how we interact with technology. And what's coming is hard to guess, but you could make some sort of educated guesses going forward.
You describe your relationship with so many tech titans in the book. Steve Jobs is one who you seem to respect perhaps the most or among the most, even though you point out that he really wasn't perfect. But there's a lot that others can learn from him. What do you think other tech leaders can learn from Steve Jobs?
You know, and he was quite sick in that particular interview, as you could see. He was very thin and sort of rail thin and gaunt, but he was still vibrant. Here's the thing. He's a very complex figure, and he had a lot of personal foibles you could have with him. But the fact of the matter is he was very visionary, knitting it all together in a lot of ways, got better over time in terms of how he introduced stuff. And he's not the technologist. He's fully responsible for the iPhone, which was a critical moment in computing, and also making the graphical user interface that everybody else followed. People tended to follow Apple. Even though Apple's also been a fast follower, a lot of the stuff that they did got people online and got people using it. As to his legacy, I think, you know, he was an adult kind of compared to, right now, everything he did that was difficult looks like lovely compared to some of the current people, right, who are really quite venal and toxic. He was not that. He was a thoughtful person. He read history. He understood poetry. He understood art. He had a much wider vision of society than most of the people now do.
And you talk about this sort of strange frenemy relationship between him and Bill Gates, and you even brought them together on stage. Can you give us some insight of what it was like working with the two of them and seeing the two of them?
If you had to put it together, I guess it would be sort of like bringing together Thomas Edison and Henry Ford together. I mean, they're different industries, obviously, but two big major inventors over time together. And they had different ways. Gates certainly was the more successful business person for a long time. Not now, but was for a long time. And Jobs was sort of the visionary. And so it was really important to bring them together to talk about it because historically speaking, I think that interview will go down hundreds of years from now. People will study it and the interactions between them.
Indeed. And one of the most complicated relationships you describe is your back and forth with Elon Musk. For a while, Elon Musk was a good source of yours until he wasn't. You have said that you appreciate the Elon who is focused on space travel at SpaceX and the electric cars at Tesla and even Neuralink. But not the guy who's running X, a.k.a. Twitter. What is that guy all about, the Elon we're seeing now?
That guy should blast off to Mars and stay there. That's my feeling. But, I like Space Elon. some people call him Space Karen now, but I like Space Elon. I like Car Elon. I do like Neuralink Elon. I kind of think it's interesting. I think what's happened is this personality that you're seeing at Twitter and X is bleeding into all the other Elons in a way that's really unfortunate. And as much as he's a visionary and done a lot of things, great business person, I think that's where he'll really, truly be appreciated in that regard, and a risk taker. He's sort of turned into this heinous political creature who has no governors on him and has no ability to understand how hateful he's become. And, I think that was part of his personality forever. I think that's not something, but it was a much smaller part of his personality and has sort of grown outsized as his power and influence has grown.
What do you think is driving him?
I don't know. If you read the Wall Street Journal, a lot of ketamine, right? I think it's not a joke, though. But I mean, he really
he's open about the fact that he's taking ketamine therapy. He finds it to be helpful. He says that he works with a doctor on that. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Whatever. He can do whatever he wants. People can, it's America. I think probably as anyone becomes more powerful and richer, they surround themselves by ever more unctuous enablers around them that say they're right all the time. I think something happened during COVID. A lot of people it happened to where he became more radicalized he kept railing about the deep state and conspiracy theories. He kind of dabbled in all that. And I think once you go down those rabbit holes, it's very hard to come out of them. Of course, he thinks he's completely right, and the rest of us are the ones not there. You
also talk about Mark Zuckerberg, who, of course, founded Facebook. At one of your conferences, he famously sweat through one of his sweatshirts, which as a sweater, I can relate to.
Are you? You're a sweater?
Yeah. He's obviously been on quite the journey from his Harvard dorm room to running a company now with billions of users. At this point in his career, what do you think is motivating Mark Zuckerberg?
Different things. He tried to go off into the metaverse, and that didn't quite work very well so far. And so now they're sort of shifting back to AI, I think, which is probably a better area for him to put the playground for him. Eventually, social media is starting to really disintegrate or really go off into different directions. He's trying to do something with Threads, which isn't a bad product. I like it. But ultimately, all these companies, the young eats its old, right? And so at some point, even though they're huge, they're not going to be the center of action. But right now, in terms of advertising, they have a very successful business. What happens to a lot of these people is they get other interests, and they, like Jeff Bezos in space and his fiance or whatever else they happen to interest them, and they don't like the date that brung them, right? They don't like the business they were in. The Google guys are similar. They're off doing other things than what they originally made their money on.
Well, I guess when you have multi-billion dollars, you can kind of do whatever you want, right?
Hundreds of.
And you feel like that's too much power for a few people, right?
I do. Yeah, look, I don't begrudge. Some of these people are nice people. They're earnest people. Mark is particularly earnest, actually. But I don't think you should have unaccountable power in this society when a very small group of tech companies have no regulations against them in any way. Think about it, like the broadcast industry does, the pharmaceutical industry, the airline industry. Everyone else has to play by certain guardrails. And you can rail all you want about government regulation, but they don't have any, right? And they have the most money and the most lobbyists. And, a lot of what they do affects our society in ways that are very different than, I don't know, Tyson Foods, right? Only so many people eat chicken, I guess. But this is pervasive in our politics and our society, in our comedy, in our kids and everything else. It's an addictive. It's addictive in a way that's very difficult to pull away from because it's also necessary. And so I do think there needs to be some accountability to their unlimited power, which right now is unlimited.
Up next, we talk with Kara Swisher about Governor Gavin Newsom. Stay with us. We are talking with tech journalist Kara Swisher, who is author of Burn Book. And in here, you write about your encounters with different politicians, including Gavin Newsom over the years.
That's right.
You've interacted with him for decades, including his time as San Francisco mayor, now, of course, as governor. What do you make of him? And what do you make of his future?
Well, he looks more stately now, doesn't he, with the gray hair? But, he's a very ambitious, aggressive politician. As are most, it seems more obvious to him. But he was always early to tech, I'll tell you that. He was obviously, he should have been, given he was mayor of San Francisco. But, there's a lot of different Gavin Newsoms. I was always in debt to him for what he did around gay marriage. That took a lot of guts to do something like that. Same time, people have given him, if you were going to be a critic, you'd talk about the issues of homelessness and taxation and over-regulatory environment of California. It's not necessarily his issue alone, but certainly one that's in California. I think he's quite smart. I think he's really he's gotten better over the years. I don't know how else to put it. He's sort of evolved in a way. I think he's become a very persuasive surrogate for the Biden administration and for Democrats in general. He obviously has bigger ambitions, seems to me. But I find him to be a really interesting and intriguing politician. Whether he's going to be president or not, that's a big question. But he certainly is setting himself up for that kind of run in at least 2028.
At least 2028. Some are questioning
Well, I don't
now.
know. I can't say.
And
then there's Kamala Harris,
Right.
another California. I met her when she was a district attorney for San Francisco. So, there's a lot going on right now, let's just say. But I'm not a political pundit.
If Trump gets back in there, which after the last debate, it looks more likely that he will,
Could be.
how do you think that tech would handle Trump in a potential second term?
Well, they're actually flocking to him, if you notice. Quite a few of them include the Elon group. It's sort of like the sharks and the jets right now among tech people. It's really interesting. Like there's Elon and a whole pack of people. I'm not even going to name them because they're like second and third bananas, essentially, to Elon. That's what he has around him. And then you have people like Reid Hoffman, Mark Cuban, and others who are backing Biden and tend to back the Democrats. They're a very strong force, but it's certainly not a monolith of liberal, liberalism as people tend to think of it as.
When we come back, Kara Swisher on the art of interviewing and what so many people get wrong. We're talking to Kara Swisher, author of Burn Book, and you are known for being a great interviewer. We had Katie Couric on here a few weeks ago who said that you are the best interviewer in the country.
Oh,
and I'm wondering...
That's nice. Not her?
Yeah.
She's pretty good.
Well, I said besides her. I'm sure she would pick
besides her.
herself.
That's what I thought, yeah.
What is your preparation process for an interview?
Oh, it's interesting. I have great producers who bring me a lot of data and stuff like that. I actually read there's a book, I read the books. I study a lot of their speeches and everything else. I know a lot about them, and a lot of the tech people I already knew a lot about because I covered them for years. But I spent a lot of time thinking about like a conversation and not like an interview. Like I think a lot of interviewers go in interviews and they're like, next question and the next one, and they haven't heard what the person said or whatever. And I tend to, if something interesting pops up, I tend to go that way. I also ask the obvious question. I know that sounds crazy, but most people, my favorite thing of interviewers is some people say that you can be like, I'm like, I think you're a jerk. tell me why I'm wrong or something. You know what I mean? I don't mean jerk, but you know what I mean? Like, I tend to be very straightforward. And so I think smart people like that. I also don't let them off the hook if they give a non-answer. I say that I don't understand all the words you just said together in a group. I try to do it humor. That's another thing. I think I'm a pretty funny interviewer. And I don't shy away from, and I don't mean the hard questions in the snarky questions. I don't mind challenging people. I also don't mind liking people. A lot of interviewers feel they have to one-up someone. I don't think I have that. I'm trying to bring illumination to the listener versus my own self-aggrandizement, I think. That's another thing.
Right. I think a lot of people make that mistake. What would you ask Kara Swisher if you were interviewing Kara Swisher?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. Why is it a love story? Like, no one's asked me that. Like, why
is it a love story?
Because I love tech. I think that I believe in the perfectibility of man through technology. I do. I wouldn't have gotten into it if I hadn't. And I do think that it's been misused in some cases. All technologies get misused. But there is so much we could do around AI and cancer research, unnecessary deaths due to drug interactions, simple things like that, drug discovery, space travel, dealing with climate change tech. I really do have great hopes if we applied, our better angels to these technologies. And they're all, the biggest and most important quote in that book is the Paul Virilio quote, where he says, when you invent the ship, you invent the shipwreck. When you invent electricity, you invent electrocution, et cetera. And I really believe that's the case. And what we have to start doing is focusing on the ships and keeping the ships not from wrecking, creating lighthouses, creating things we can put the electricity in the sky so we don't get electrocuted. But we could also bring a great amount of comfort and care to so much of the world around food safety and climate safety and everything else. And so I want to find those people and talk to those people and help those people versus, making a billionaire another stupid, dirty $1 billion. The money warps everything. It just does. And then they become experts on everything. Like, if I have to listen to another Elon Musk discussion of cesarean sections, I think I'm going to lose my mind.
You don't want him in the delivery room?
Although he has a lot of kids, so at least he can speak from just a tiny bit.
He has like 55
But he's not an
kids.
expert about uteruses. For sure he's not. No, that's for sure.
No. When we come back, Kara Swisher gets personal about motherhood and plays our personal issues game. You get personal in this book as well. Talk about how motherhood has shaped you.
Speaking of uteruses.
Speaking of uteruses, use your own.
Yeah, I did indeed.
How has motherhood
forever.
shaped you? And also, you have 2 older kids and 2 younger kids. And are you a different mother at different places in your life?
I don't think so. I think there they are. They're so cute. I think I'm a great parent, and I think that my kids are such an important part of my life. I certainly work a lot, that's for sure. And I do think it's important for people to work and also try to have both. That's Louis right there. That's an electric truck. That's an electric autonomous truck we were interested in there. I think it's really important to have kids because it makes you believe in the future, right? You want to believe in the future if you're anybody on this planet. And if you don't, you just kind of give up, essentially. And so one of the things that's been important is to make sure I build really good kids, right? I create very good kids who are secure and feel loved. And that's a really important job, I think. I think if someone was asking me, you work so much, you've done so many things, what's your most important accomplishment? And I always say my kids. One of the things you asked me about interviewing, I think about what someone said to me, and I think it's a quote, but it was, be interested and you'll be interesting. And that's what I say to my kids: be interested in something, and and be empathetic, and especially boys. Right now, there's a real, as Scott Galloway on our podcast talks about a lot, the crisis of boys is there's a crisis around young men that is really significant, and I think a lot about creating really empathetic, kind, action-oriented young men, too, at the same time, who feel they have a purpose in life.
We'll wrap things up with 2 quick games that we play here on The Issue
Sure.
Is. First one's called the name game, which is one word that comes to mind for each of these people. The first word that comes to mind, all right? Here we go. What is one word to describe Elon Musk?
Word. Disappointment.
Steve Jobs.
Visionary.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Toxic.
Jeff Bezos.
Best midlife crisis ever. Sorry.
Your mentor, Walt Mossberg.
Kind.
Your podcast host, Scott Galloway.
A journey.
And your wife, Amanda Katz.
Amazing.
Very nice. And finally, we play a game called Personal
That's too
Issues.
easy.
This is 30 seconds to learn your cultural favorites. The first thing that comes to mind, real quick, here we go. What is your favorite TV show?
Oh, Bridgerton, season 3. Amazing.
Favorite book?
Right now. North Woods by Daniel Mason right now. I love it. It's actually could be my favorite book of all time right now.
Favorite musical artist?
Oh, Taylor Swift. Hello. Come on.
What is the best tech gadget?
My iPhone. The iPhone.
Favorite meal?
Oh, that's a good one. Wow, I like so many. People are going to hate me, but I love a good steak.
Okay.
I love a good steak.
And who is your role model?
Oh, so many people. My dad. I write about him in the book a lot. My dad.
And he died.
And my grandmother.
And he died when you were young, but he was really important. And how did he shape you?
Kindness, same thing, just kind and generous. After he died, I wrote a piece about him many years later in the Washington Post, and I got so many letters from people he helped, and I had no idea.
What a great legacy to leave behind, kindness. And,
it is.
And in terms of TV shows, you didn't mention Succession.
I love Succession, of course. You made me pick.
The Succession.
You made me pick.
You hosted the Succession podcast, which was so great.
I did.
And last hard question, did you like the way that Succession ended? Did they get it right?
They did. They did. That's exactly what's going to happen when Rupert Murdoch kicks it, if he ever does. Yeah, I think it was great. I thought they did not go for easy answers. They did not go for easy answers. And I thought it was exactly what would have happened. I thought that was a terrific show. I have nothing, but that was the most fun I ever had doing a podcast because the people in it were great. The writers were great. Brian was great. He said, go yourself a lot. You're not allowed to say that on the air, but you
okay.
You can bleep that out.
Yeah.
I think everyone involved was so creative and interesting on that show, and it hit every single note perfectly.
Kara Swisher, I can't thank you enough for being with us.
Thank you.
Really encourage people to get Burn Book, and thanks for all the important reporting you do. And thanks.
Well, I appreciate it. You're an excellent interviewer, I must say. You're very delightful and lively. Thank you. Everyone told me that, but now I know.
Oh my God, that means the world. Kara Swisher, thank you so much for being with us this week, and thank you for watching The Issue Is. We'll be back next week with more.